Good evening and welcome to Tuesday Folk People. My name is Maddie Leedham, and this evening we're going to be journeying to beautiful Devon to explore the music and stories of the duo Suthering. Known as much for their work in the folk community as for their beautiful harmony-filled sound, there is one word I would use to describe this pair, and that is inspiring. The pair recently released their debut album, If We Turn Away, which draws on a variety of themes and draws heavily on their experiences running choirs, workshops, singing retreats, and sing-arounds where they bring folk music to the wider community. For the next hour, we're going to discuss all of this and much more, including exclusive performances of Suthering's unique music. So now, it brings me absolute pleasure to welcome Julu and Heg, aka Suthering, to our online studio. Hello, Julu and Heg. How are you doing?
Yeah,
Yeah,
good,
really good,
thanks.
thanks. Really good. Nice to see you.
Yeah, and you. Really, really glad to have you here today. And you're currently in Devon. Have I got that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. We're in Tavistock. It's slightly drizzly Tavistock, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's
Not
very
bad.
nice where I am. Maybe the
Is
weather
it?
will pass over. Um,
Oh,
Before we go into the interview, obviously, if anyone has watched Tuesday Folk People before, they know that we like to have our first song first. But before we even do that, I just wanted to just explore your band name because you have the most beautiful band name. Like the meaning is amazing. And in case anyone doesn't know what Suthering means, can you tell our audience what it means?
Sure. Yeah. So we spent a long time trying to decide on a name, and we couldn't quite find anything that fit until we were looking through a Robert Macfarlane book called Landmarks, which is a book that's kind of a glossary, I suppose, of lost words about the landscape. And we came across Suthering, which means the sound of the wind through the trees or the sound of wind under a bird's wing. And we just felt that really matched what we're about musically and in our lives, I suppose, with a connection to nature.
Amazing. So should we now go for our first song today? And the first song that we have is Boatman. Can you tell us about it before we hear it?
yeah. So Boatman was the only song that I wrote during lockdown. So I definitely had a bit of a kind of creative blank spot during lockdown, which was a shame. But Boatman sort of came towards the end of it. And it's based on the feeling of being isolated and misunderstood in a situation that we were kind of all in and sharing together. And it tells that story through the boatman, who is the boatman who ferries souls across to the other side, and a young girl, and how they meet each other and their story.
Hey, Mr. Boatman, won't you listen for a while? Well, my eyes can't see for crying. Is your heart too numb to care? I'm so frightened of the ferryman. I'm too scared to go alone. Oh, won't you listen for a while to me? The boatman settled down upon the dusty shore. He said, God, you cannot take my boat. You do not have the cause. My world ain't for the living, so while there's breath still in your bones, just take these words and journey home from me. And step lightly, my friend. May your words leave no trace. May your footsteps leave no unrest upon these soils. May your hands only toil in answer to the call. May your heart always carry you home. The girl tarried and the boatman cried. The souls are looking for a way to the other side, and I'm so tired I can't describe. Won't you sit here for a while and talk to me? Or can we rest here for a while? The boatman cried. Oh, I cried, a young girl, I've never felt so alone. But I'm not ready for the reaping, 'cause like my soul has been asleep for so long now. And oh, cried the boatman, where did we go so wrong? Well, let's sit here for a while. Feels like my eyes are open wide for the very first time. Oh, can we rest here for a while? The young girl sighed. And step lightly, my friend. May your words leave no trace. May your footsteps leave no unrest upon these soils. May your hands only toil in answer to the call. May your heart always carry you home to me. The young girl sat down and took his pale hands in her own. She said, my dear worthy boatman, I'm so sad to see you so. May the one foot in the shadows leave the other on solid ground. And should you fall and lose your way, well, I'll carry you. And should you fall and lose your way, well, I'll carry you. And step lightly, my friend. May your words leave no trace. May your footsteps leave no unrest upon these soils. May your hands only toil in answer to the call. May your heart always carry you home. May your heart always carry. May your heart always carry. May your heart always carry you home. May your heart always carry. May your heart always carry. May your heart always carry you home to me.
As we've already discussed, you guys are based in Devon, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the Devon folk scene, because it's quite a rich area for folk music, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. It's especially Dartmoor because it's so entrenched with stories and songs. And that's one of the reasons that we moved here, I suppose, to kind of tap into that a little bit more and be immersed in it.
Yeah. Do you think there's any kind of link between the fact that Devon's a bit more out there, it's a bit more in the sticks, harder to get to, and the fact that the folk tradition is still so prevalent and so strong there, compared to like somewhere in the Midlands, say, where it's just like people constantly travelling through? Do you think there's any link to that?
Yeah, I think that there's much more opportunity for stories to be passed down through sort of generations, because there's a kind of, although there are new people coming in, a lot of people do stay in Devon. But I also think that there's the landscape. It's so wild. Like Dartmoor is just this huge expanse of kind of slightly barren but beautiful land, and with it, and people have sort of evolved around that land as well, farming it and living around it. That I think there's strong traditions with it, and also it gives you this sense of kind of freedom and space to write stories, and it kind of really gets the imagination going, being on this bleak expanse of moor. It's amazing.
Yeah. And Julu, didn't you grow up there or something? And it's like thanks to the area that you got folk. Have I got that right?
Yeah, so I grew up just outside of Tavistock, a few miles out of Tavistock, in the middle of nowhere, and was brought up very much kind of going to folk clubs. My stepdad ran a folk club in Tavistock, and yeah, I sort of travelled around with him and my mum singing little folk songs when I was a teenager, and I just absolutely loved it.
Yeah. Because the pair of you live in Devon now, but you haven't always lived in Devon. Was it Bristol that you used to live in?
Yeah, so both of us spent about 10 years living in Bristol, and it's an amazing city, which we both miss. But I suppose it's about weighing up what you need at different points in your life. And I think that we both were ready to try something different than living in the city and be more connected to nature and be more connected with our immediate community as well.
Do you find that then the folk scene now in Devon is very different from Bristol? Because I don't really know much about either folk scene. And we previously spoke to Jim Causley on Tuesday Folk People, and he gave us a bit of an exploration into Devon. But it's great always to hear it from other perspectives, and especially people who've been in another city and then come back to Devon. How do you find that the two compare, Bristol and Devon?
There's differences and similarities. So I suppose the similarities would be that, and I find this everywhere in the folk scene, is that folk musicians seem to get to know each other, and there's no real sense of kind of competition. There's a lot of real camaraderie, like everyone's really supportive of each other. And if you play folk music, you will just immediately get to know everybody that also plays folk music. It's got that kind of really lovely feel to it. And that was exactly like that in Bristol, and it was exactly like that when we moved down here. But I suppose the difference is that in Bristol there's so much going on that it can be a little bit harder maybe to sort of be a folk musician. Whereas down here there's sort of this, it's so entrenched in people's lives that people still really love it. It's still very like active type of music.
It's part of the life down here in a way.
Yeah.
More so than in Bristol. I think because Bristol has, like you say, so much going on in every genre and every kind of different aspect of the arts that you can sometimes feel a little bit lost in that.
Yeah. And as if to prove the point that you just said about everyone in folk knows everyone in folk, you two both know Jim Causley. Obviously, who I just mentioned.
We did a gig with him before Christmas. Was it? In Plymouth. Yeah.
There you go. I'm sure there's like a million other Tuesday Folk People as well that you know. Just there's so many connections, and usually it's like, do you know them? And everyone says, yeah, I know them.
Yeah, we saw that you had the longest johns on.
Yeah, we know them.
Bonus as well, you know them as well, don't you?
We do.
There you go. We could just stay here for the next hour just listing everyone off. It would be, yeah, you know them. Okay, well, let's now talk a little bit about how you formed. And there was one thing that I was really fascinated about you formed. And am I right in saying that one of the reasons you began performing together as a duo was through like a mutual desire to take action against inequality in folk music or something like that?
Yeah, so we had a lot of conversations about how rotten some of the endings were in folk songs for women. We talked about it a lot, didn't we, when we first met?
But we started realizing we were kind of jollying along with each other with these folk songs, and they were like, "Oh my god, this story's horrid. This is a horrible way to go."
Yeah, so we did a lot sort of investigating into that, and then started sort of. The first song that we really played together was As I Roved Out, wasn't it? And we changed the ending. We just changed the ending straight off the bat.
Yeah. We did.
Yeah, and that set the precedent.
It did.
Yeah. And how do you then usually approach these songs to change the ending? Because obviously it could be seen as quite controversial to change like a traditional song. So how do you like manage to do that, maintain that tradition, but also make it so that it's more accessible for today's society?
Well, I think you're really good at coming up with the lyrics. You're quite good at finding the right style in the lyrics. I kind of come out with these really out there statements. Julu kind of tweaks it so they sound like they're part of the song. It sounds like it could be a verse of the song. And I think that's the crucial thing, is to, if you're going to change and adapt it, to keep it within its own style and character.
Yeah, and we also, there's always a sort of caveat, you know, like we tell everyone that we've changed the endings. We make a thing out of that, and you know, and I think that there are definitely a few people out there who I think have judged us a little harshly for doing it, but most people understand that there are hundreds of versions of every single folk song. And it's just part of the kind of oral tradition of folk music that things get changed and updated and they move. And it's not like you're erasing the song from before by singing it in your own way. It just means that there's another version for people to choose from.
Why do you think it is important to do it?
I think that it's part of the tradition in a way, to keep the narrative going, but also to keep it current, because actually folk songs were always comments on their time and, you know, stories of their time. And if we're continuing to tell those stories, why not make them more relevant to now?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Sophie Crawford actually is doing a lovely project called Queer Folk, which is exploring queer characters in folk music, and I think that's really, really great too.
Yeah, it's about making it so that it isn't just closed off to or open to one small demographic. It's open to everybody, and finding yourself in the traditional folk music is really important. I 100%. I think it's a really great thing to do personally, and I really love like listening to the innovative ways that people do bring it into the modern day society and stuff. I just think that it's really great because, as you said, there are so many versions. I think last time when we spoke before, you said something like there's like 100 versions of Geordie, and so what is the harm in having another one that's maybe more relatable to someone else? I think that there's nothing wrong with that personally for me. But you also said previously that sometimes people get a bit attached to certain types of songs, and they get a bit annoyed then when you change it. Like one was night visiting songs or something. Can you kind of explain what I mean there? 'Cause I'm pretty sure you've had
So we find that the night visitor category of folk, it's some of it, and don't get me wrong, some of it is very beautiful. These kind of people seeing their lost love sort of coming back to them, like that's really lovely. But there's some that fall into the same category, that are basically guys kind of turning up at the window of a woman and desperately trying to get in, and then leaving them. And I just find that a bit difficult to sing, really. So it's a bit creepy. And so we changed the words of a song called Cold, Haily, Rainy Night, just slightly. Literally, we changed a few words just to slightly alter the narrative, so she doesn't end up basically being left and brokenhearted. And we had some comments about, you know, kind of like leave the night visitor category alone. And we said, you know, there's plenty of versions of Cold, Haily, Rainy Night where their words aren't changed, so they can just listen to that one. And
yeah, exactly.
Plenty of stalker stories.
There are plenty.
So obviously that's like an example of when it isn't received that well. But would you say on the whole people are quite understanding or quite appreciate the work that you've done?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think people find it refreshing. I mean, and you know, it's not that lots of people change the words and adapt the songs, and it's not exactly completely new to do that. But I do think that because we're making a point in a way as well when we're singing these songs, that people quite enjoy that, especially the women. We get some fists in the air at gigs sometimes.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah. Why do you think it is that the male narrative songs have lasted? Because there were a lot of female songs in the past, but there aren't so many now. Why do you think that there's that kind of heavy divide towards male?
Well, I think a lot of the stories that were told by men were the ones that were notated. and therefore, I mean, not necessarily a lot of the things, or a lot of these are passed down, but generally in a, I don't know, quite predominantly male society or patriarchal society, you would have the stories being told from male to male and being written down and passed on in a way that women's stories might not. Would you agree with that, Heg?
Yeah. I think the women, like there are definitely women's stories in folk music that that they definitely exist. But I think that would be true.
Yeah, and I think also women's stories back then. There's a lot of sort of lullabies and things like that are very definitely sort of things that women would sing to their babes and that kind of thing. But there's not loads that would be relevant to today because of the position that women had in the times that these were written, hundreds of years ago. So obviously the kind of the relationship between mothers and daughters and like lost loves and things like that, yes, that's relatable, but there's other things that are not so relatable nowadays.
Yeah, there's not so much representation of what women are like now.
No.
Which is, I suppose, what we'd like to change. So giving them these slightly rebellious endings, rebelling against the narrative that's prevailed so far.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's now go on for our second song. And am I right in saying that this next song is actually a traditional song? If not, you've made it sound extremely traditional, but it's called Blood and Gold.
Yeah, so Blood and Gold, we originally heard this song sung by the Silly Sisters and loved it. And the Silly Sisters, you were a big fan of when you were a kid.
My mum used to play their album. I think it might only have one album, but my mum used to play it in the car all the time, and we all used to sing along to it.
Yeah, and the Blood and Gold is the tune is traditional and was collected by Bella Bartok, and the words were put to it by Andy Irvine.
One rides a captain and 300 soldier lads out of the morning mist and through the silent snow. Whistling gaily rides the captain at their head. Behind him soldier boy sadly weeping go. For when you took my gold and swore to follow me, you sold away your lives and your liberty. No more you'll till the soil, no more you'll work the land, no more to the dance you'll go and take girls by the hand. Oh, mother, weep for your son. He is gone to kill and die. You'll reap, you'll die by the keen edge of the sword, all alone by the muddy Danube shore. She gave the order for the drummers to beat their drums, the smothers of my clothes, the life a soldier lives. Unfurl your ragged banners and brace your pale young face. They'll all die of the fire, there'll be no hiding place. Oh, mother, hear the drum beat in the village square. Oh, mother, that drum's for me to go for a soldier there. Mother, sisters, wives, weep for us. Martyrs Cain, we die alone.
As we've just discovered, you do a lot of work with traditional music and changing it, but you're not exclusively in trad folk, are you? You kind of branch out into other genres and other styles. What kind of things do you also do?
Can I answer this?
You answer it.
I suppose I don't know how considered that is really, because so I'd say about 80% of our set is original songs, and I don't think that either of us set out necessarily to write in a particular style, including folk. We just write what we write, and then sometimes when we're arranging the songs, it will kind of nudge itself into a different category, like Survey, for example, which ended up quite classical sounding because the piano sort of leads it, and then Boatman is the complete opposite of that. So yeah, we I think we have quite a broad range of influences outside of the folk genre, and they do find their way into our songs, but I don't think it's necessarily intentional or considered.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah, and I think that people have struggled to kind of classify us in a way. There's definitely people in the folk scene that would call us left field, which I think is really funny. But they would call us kind of left field folk because, like Heg said, there's the piano there, and that's got quite a classical sound, and the flute as well is quite a classical instrument. And I think the reason we end up sort of sitting in the folk genre is more because of the storytelling aspect of our songs, and the things that we talk about and the way we write is a very storytelling way of writing, and the inclusion obviously of traditional songs in our own style put in there as well.
Yeah. Heg, do you think in any way that your musical background has any kind of influence on this fusion? Because I think you told me before that you were kind of split in two, and there was the folky side, and then there was like, was it musical theatre and things side? Explain a bit better.
Yeah, definitely. So my dad was a big folk fan and is also a musician, not performing but plays for himself, plays guitar and various other things. And my mum was big into pop and musical theatre, so he had this clash of worlds, I suppose, that I definitely think they fused within the way that I write.
Yeah, because I mean, there's another thing that both of you have that's quite unusual and does bring you a bit more out of that traditional folk section, and that's your use of instruments, because you're not exclusively like the typical folk instruments. What instruments do you have that could be seen as a little more out there?
Okay, the piano definitely. I mean, it always depends on how we play them as well. So, you know, for example, Survey is a traditional folk song, but the piano is very dramatic and very unlike any other version of Survey that I've heard.
Yeah.
And then the flutes as well. Sometimes you play them in quite a classical style, and sometimes you're playing a jig and there's more percussion in that sound.
Yeah, I think because we were both classically trained as musicians. I was classically trained on the flute from a really young age, and you were classically trained vocally on the piano,
sort of to a point.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting because for me, I sort of went through all the grades with my flute and learnt classically, and then decided that I wanted to turn it into more of a folk style, and it was definitely a kind of real shift of how to play the flute, but the training definitely comes through in the music. It's hard to it's hard for it not to. And I think your piano has quite a classical sound. Like Black Bull is very sort of dramatic and classical as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I when I learned piano, I learned classical, and actually it's really I tried to find folk arrangements notated for the piano to try and just get myself more into that. And it's really hard to find.
Yeah.
If anyone has any suggestions for that, that'd be
Leave
great.
it in the comments below. Yeah.
Do.
Amazing. I mean, don't get me wrong. I know I just said that they may be more unusual than the typical folk instruments, but I would in no way say they don't fit. I think that they absolutely blend into the sound. And yeah, it's brilliant. So now I want to explore something else that's huge in your music and with you as musicians, and that is your work with community and doing all sorts of like community engagement with music and that kind of thing. Now you do quite a lot, like I said, community music making. In what ways do you kind of achieve that?
So we run 2 choirs in our local area. So one in Tavistock called the Wheelhouse Folk Choir, and then one in Plymouth called the Great Sea Choir. And we run them, they're community choirs, but we set the bar quite high for them. So it's totally unauditioned, anyone can join. And that makes it a really inclusive place to be. But we also teach them singing techniques and ways to improve their singing. So what we end up with is quite a high standard for a community choir, but no auditions. So it's a really amazing thing to create a community where they feel they can achieve something really high standard without the pressure of auditions or any kind of hierarchy.
Yeah, and then we also, the other kind of branch of our community stuff is that we run sing-arounds in our local area, which are inclusive as well. So we basically get people that maybe don't know anything about folk, or they come along and we teach songs that have a chorus so that everyone can join in. It's kind of like a very, very informal choir session almost. We end up leading it. And then we run singing retreats as well, folk singing retreats, which people can come for a whole weekend and do workshops and learn songs, and we do walking and yoga and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Why do you do that? What is it you're wanting to achieve through it?
Through the retreats or all of it?
Through all of it, yeah. All of this kind of community work that you do with music.
Well, the choirs are definitely I think that both of us really love being surrounded by people and connecting with people, but also I know I can speak for myself when I say that I absolutely love choirs and a cappella singing and the joy that getting that really tight and beautiful can bring. And then the sing-arounds, we do those totally for free. We do them for charity, don't we? And I think that part of running those was to try and make folk singing and folk sing-arounds more accessible, because sometimes with sing-arounds it's very easy if you're a newcomer to go along and sit at the back and feel like, oh my god, I'm not going to get up and sing a song by myself, and you can sort of fade into the background. And we wanted to create something where you don't have to know any songs, you don't have to have ever heard any folk music before in your life. You can just hear the chorus and then join in, and it's inclusive. And I think that's inclusivity is a big thing about all the projects that we do.
Yeah, and like just getting people together to sing feels so important. I mean, it just feels like the most natural thing in the world to have within your community, just gather people together for a sing. Like it's like a historical thing, isn't it? That is sort of feels like it's only allowed in the folk scene. And I suppose that is one of our missions, is to try and spread that to kind of other people who might not find themselves in a session because it's just something they've never thought about.
We started the sing-arounds in Bristol actually, when we in the last year that we were there, and we did it in our local pub, the Dark Horse, and we didn't think anyone was going to come, and we had about 50 on the first session, and then by Christmas we had 80 in this tiny room. There's people everywhere, and we realized what a hunger there is for this kind of thing. It's not so formal, but you can go and you can just swing your pint pre-COVID, and just have a really good sing. And a lot of people explained that they never really knew what folk music was.
No,
so that felt really cool.
They just thought they'd come along because we advertised it as like just come along and have a sing, basically.
Yeah. And why do you think that folk as like a musical style, musical genre is actually so good for like reaching a community? What is it about it?
God, I don't know. I suppose it's a style of music that this is just my own opinion, it's always felt quite accessible. Like there isn't a huge separation between the musicians and the audience. There's always like a crossover. Folk musicians very much kind of traditionally sing in the round, or like will sing in a group of people. I think it's something that has been born from music being just played in amongst people rather than as a separate thing. And I think that is still very much kept alive by folk musicians nowadays. Like you go to a folk concert and people are invited to join in with the songs, and I don't know, I suppose it's from because of where it originated from.
Yeah.
And that's kind of still held true in folk music today.
Yeah. And the joining in aspect, I think, is part of that, isn't it? You know, that people have permission to be part of it.
Yeah.
Rather than the culture that you so often see in other genres of music, where it's like a kind of celebrity status type thing, where the musician is this slightly heralded separate being.
Yeah.
Whereas actually in folk music, it's about humans connecting.
Yeah.
And that's the most important part of it, and connecting through the stories you're singing, and giving people permission to be part of it.
Amazing. And I think that it really is, because that's kind of what folk is. It's music of the people, and that's what you're doing, is you're bringing it, especially to people who don't usually listen to folk music. I think that that's just exactly what folk needs, is to be brought to that wider audience, and especially people who aren't already in that wider audience, or wider community. And that's exactly what your work is doing. So thanks. Thanks. Now we are going on to our third song now, which is a very beautiful one, and this is Kingfisher. Can you tell us about this one before we hear it?
Sure. So this was my one pandemic offering. So in that kind of difficult, that first lockdown period, both of us were completely void of creativity, really. We saw lots of other musicians busy squirreling away, making albums and all sorts of other things. And I think there was a slight numbness. Certainly I felt that, a kind of emptiness, really, in terms of creativity. And we were all allowed to do our daily walks, of course. And the closest, we did lots of different walks, but the closest one to our house was a canal path that runs outside the house. And you sort of snake past lots of buildings and houses and things, and eventually it brings you out into these woods. And it was a real solace in there, because you could see all the different bits of nature coming out in the different seasons, and it was very beautiful. And but the most impressive thing about this canal path is the kingfisher that comes to visit. And if you're lucky, you'll see him, and he sits on a little branch until you get level with him, and then he darts off and flies a little bit further along, and then you get level and off he goes. And many times, particularly in lockdown, I saw him and he followed me all the way to the end of the path and back. And so it was a real symbol of hope during that time, being able to witness this little magic miracle of nature with his flash of blue.
Right on the sun, on the cold of the canal, with a frost that cracked at our feet. shone the sun. The water it mourns us with time standing still. The Kingfisher warns us. One day I came upon a girl, I asked her who she was. She said, I've lost my way and I'm looking for the end. And then she looked around and saw the water stretching on. She said, I'll take a look. What could be the harm? And oh, how we all wish we had a map that would take us straight to the end. We'll all wander in the end. We all need to make a change, one that's rooted in the ground, and then spring will come again, lift us out. Somewhere in silence we can rest, find the answers that we seek, send the dark clouds away, let spring begin. Send the dark clouds away. See it in a flash of blue, hope along the water flew. See it in a flash of blue, hope along the water flew. See it in a flash of blue, hope along the water flew. See it in a flash of blue, hope along the water flew.
What a beautiful song. Is it quite well received by the audience that you play to?
Yeah, I mean, particularly down here. So we played our album preview night last Friday at the Wharf in Tavistock. There's about 200 people there, and they all know the walk. So when Heg was telling the story about the Kingfisher, you could hear everyone going, they're like nodding along, because we all love that Kingfisher so much. But this collective appreciation of the Kingfisher.
The most famous Kingfisher in the world.
Yeah.
Or in Tavistock, at least.
Yeah.
But now, actually, no, it's also the most famous in Homestage. It's the first mention we had of the Kingfisher, so it's
Great.
getting out there. It's like a folk tale. It's just gradually going further and further. Anyway, so you mentioned just then that your album launched last week, you said. Now this is for your new album that's coming out, and your album's called If We Turn Away. And I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about it, like the kind of themes that are explored in it, what people should expect when they listen to this album.
Yeah, so the name If We Turn Away came from the lyrics of one of Julu's songs, which is called This Land. And we spent a long time trying to figure out what we were going to call this album, what ties it all together. And If We Turn Away felt like a really good title because of the kind of conscience aspect of it, conscience for your environment, for each other. And there's a lot of themes to do with connection and community and nature, and I think that's what ties all the songs together in a way.
Yeah. And at the time that we're recording this, the album isn't actually released, but I believe that when this interview airs, it will have gone out. So this goes out on the 25th of February.
That's the release day.
That's the release day.
Yes. So if people want to find that, that'll be on your website and all of that sort of thing.
You can buy it from Bandcamp, suthering.bandcamp.com. That's the best place to buy it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So would you say that this album kind of summarizes everything that you kind of explore in your songwriting? Or is it quite one-off and there's that you branch further into other topics at other points? Or is it really kind of an amalgamation of all that?
Oh, it's difficult to say, because it's funny, because we these particular songs as a cluster of songs, I would say, are very I don't know, they're very much of a time for us. They span a period of time that was leaving Bristol, moving to the countryside experiencing the pandemic, like all these different themes, and so the topics are all kind of similar and connected. But then I look at some of the other songs that we've been writing more currently, and they're quite different. So I think the next album will probably be completely different. There obviously our style is our style, but they are already kind of going in really different directions from this album.
I totally agree. There's a definite fieriness that's coming out in my
Yeah.
writing now, whereas these songs are definitely we didn't write them all during the pandemic, but these are songs that we've played since we started playing together, so it's kind of reflective of that whole time.
And they are reflective songs.
Yeah.
Like they are kind of thought-provoking, reflective songs, and us kind of making changes in our lives based around the things that are important to us. And I think that it is a sort of pensive album in a way, and that it speaks of sort of change and stillness and lots of different things. Whereas there's, I think in our second album there'll probably be more rage.
I wasn't going to say it, but there's definitely some of that coming through.
There's always going to be some. And are you both quite equal parts songwriters?
Yeah, we are. This album's got more of Julu's songs than mine. I definitely struggled with songwriting over the last couple of years. It appears to be back. But yeah, we always try and be quite equal with everything we do.
Yeah.
And even if one of us has written the song, when we come to arrange it, it's very much a joint effort. So there's bits of each other's songwriting in the arrangements. I think it's a real collaborative effort.
Yeah, we very much take responsibility for our own aspects of instrumentation. So I would never dictate to Heg what to play on the piano. Heg will hear what I've written and go, oh, I think this would sound really good, and write her own part, and vice versa.
Yeah. So that's one thing you've got coming up in the future, or when this airs has happened. All very, very confusing. But there's something else that you actually do have coming up in the future, which you told me about before, and I was so excited about. And this is the Songs of Separation project that you're doing. Can you tell the audience what this is?
Sure. So this is a very exciting thing that we had a huge build up to. Both of us really, really big fans of the Songs of Separation album that came out a few years ago. And Jen Hill, who's organising the project, who is an absolute force of nature, some years ago told us about this choir spin-off that she was going to do. And fast forward to last year, and she asked for choir leaders to apply to be part of a similar project that's going to the Isle of Lismore in Scotland. So it'll be 10 choir leaders, and we're going to be recording a cappella versions of some of the Songs of Separation songs and making those available to choirs across the world as a kind of resource. Yeah, so we got picked for that, which is so exciting. We're I think on the 18th. So tomorrow they're going to launch their social media pages. So by the time this airs, it will be kind of out there. So it will be 6 months tomorrow
that we go. Yeah, we go in August.
Oh, amazing. And this is on some beautiful island, isn't it?
Yeah, the Isle of Lismore, which is a tiny, tiny little island. I think it's only got like 100 and something inhabitants, but I think it's quite a creative island. I mean, I literally had never even heard of it before Jen sort of gave us the details of the project, but having looked into it, it looks unbelievable. Really? So exciting.
There's a music studio there.
There's a music studio there, and all of the participants that are going are choir leaders, but also a lot of them play instruments as well. So I envisage a lot of creative downtime of sessions and singing and playing. So it's very exciting.
Sounds absolutely amazing. I can't tell you how jealous I am to go to a little remote island and just make music. That just sounds a musician's dream, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Absolutely.
And so you've got that. Extremely exciting also. But are you touring your album? Is that going to be something that happens this year?
Yes. We're all over the place.
Yeah, we are.
I think the bookings are quite spread out. and we're going to be doing UK dates this side of the summer, and then we've got some really exciting festivals. Sidmouth and Priddy are both on the list. Chippenham, and then after the summer we're going to be doing a Scotland tour, and that's separate to the Songs of Separation project. So we'll
that'll be in October time, I think, isn't it?
And we're booking more gigs in all the time, so it's kind of looking like it's the busy year we were supposed to have in 2020, so it feels really great to be out and about doing gigs again.
Yeah. And do you ever, like, while you're touring as a duo and doing your own performances, do you get your like community engagement work and kind of incorporate that at all?
Yeah, so some of the gigs that we've got coming up over the next few months, we are also running workshops on the same day. So we'll sort of do an hour and a half or an hour workshop with a group of people, teach them some songs, and then they would come along to the evening of music and hopefully join in with some of the songs. Excuse me. And yeah, there's other places that we'll be doing concerts and also running sing-arounds. So there's lots going on, and we really try and push that side of it because we just love it so much. And it's so nice to play a gig and have a group of people there who might join in or sing along with one of your songs, or maybe chuck in some harmonies, or it just sort of fills the room. There's nothing better than a kind of room coming to life with loads of different voices. It's just so lovely.
At our album preview event, we had our choir, the Wheelhouse Folk Choir, supported. They did 5 songs, and then in the main set, they also stood up and sang a song with us.
Yeah.
And it was really beautiful.
And they were in the audience, and everyone kind of was like, what is going on?
Yeah, I was going to ask whether your community work and your duo performance stuff, do they tend to kind of just collide a lot? Do they work in partnership?
I think we'd like it to. I mean, we would ideally love to do some touring with some of the choir. You know, it would be really lovely to have that as an aspect of our show. And also, we really, really sort of love having groups of people coming to our gigs and joining in on songs, like Heg said. And looking around the room at the wharf in Tavistock last Friday, it was just full of people that we've kind of connected with through our sing-arounds and through the choirs and through our retreats, all sort of come together in one room. So in that way, it really feels like we have created something that our duo is also a part of.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. And definitely would advise our audience members to go and either check your album out, go to a workshop, sing around, go and see you perform. There's so much that they can do to interact with you guys. Now, unfortunately, we are running out of time. And so before we go to our last song, I want to say thank you so much for joining us and for chatting today and for sharing everything. And I hope it's given our audience a lot of opportunities to kind of immerse themselves in folk, which I think is very much what you guys offer people, is that chance. So thank you very much for that.
Well, thanks for having us.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. So now we have our final song, which you've mentioned a couple of times in this interview with regard to like the piano playing and the fusion of genres. So this is Sauvé, if I'm saying it right. I just don't ever seem to be able to say it right.
Yeah, everyone says it differently.
Yeah, they do, yeah.
Sauvé, I don't know. Do you want to tell us a bit about this song before we hear it?
So we have spent a lot of time trawling the internet for folk songs that have sort of strong female lead characters. And Sauvé is one that was, I think it popped up when we were sort of looking through folk archives, but it was also one that was recommended to us by people at gigs as well. And it's a story of a woman who basically dresses up as a man and goes out as a highwayman to kind of stick up her true love and see if he'll part with the ring that she's gifted him, and basically with the plan that if he did, then she'd kill him. So it's sort of it's quite extreme. It's quite like extreme in the other direction. But there's a whole group of songs about women dressing up as men and going off to sea or going to do loads of different things. So there's like a whole category of songs like that. And Survey has just got such a movement to it and such a drive, and it's in a really weird time signature. And yeah, we just sort of listened to, I think, Martin Carthy's version of it and then just absolutely fell in love with it. We're like, right, let's do some kind of crazy piano heavy arrangement of this song.
Survey, all on a day, she dressed herself in man's array, with a sword and pistol by her side, to meet a true love, awaited by. She was riding over the plain, she met a true love and bid him stand. Your gold and silver kind, sir, she said, for us this moment, your life I'll have.
Thank you very much for watching. To find out more information about our future Tuesday Folk People sessions, please sign up to our mailing list or keep an eye on our social media and website. Our next session will be a week from today at 8 p.m. See you then.